The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have some shocking and appalling video footage which has been released of a white South Carolina police officer shooting and killing an apparently unarmed black man in the back 8 times. We're talking about 33-year-old police officer Michael Slager, who has been charged with murder for the killing of 50-year-old Walter Scott. We have the video. Let's take a look at it first and then talk more about it. You're going to hear 8 gunshots, okay? 7 in quick succession, and then an 8th after a slight pause.
Oh shit. Shit.
So the backstory here is that this started with Officer Slager reportedly pulling over the driver of a vehicle with a broken taillight. Reportedly, Walter Scott ran away, at which point the police officer chased him into the grassy lot that's pictured in the video near a muffler shop. He reportedly first fired his taser, which allegedly did not stop Walter Scott. After the struggle, Officer Slager reported on his radio, "Shots fired and the suspect is down. He took my taser." However, the key difference from the officer's account and then the video, which has now been released, is that Scott is already 15 to 20 feet away when the shots are fired. The story we were told by the police before the video was released, Lewis, is not matching up at all with what we're now seeing.
Of course it's not matching up. The police department is, it seems like the priority of the police department is to protect its police officers above all else instead of the citizens that the police officers are sworn to protect. So that's what we usually hear.
Yes, except that after the video came out, even the police chief couldn't still justify standing by that bogus story because we now had video evidence. What is the law as far as using deadly force on someone who's running away from you? The Supreme Court has held that an officer may use deadly force against a fleeing suspect, and here's the key part, only when there is probable cause that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or physical injury to the officer or others. So if the guy is running away and he has a machine gun and he's already killed people with a machine gun, it's reasonable to think, you know what? I need to shoot this guy before he uses that machine gun on more people. We could all imagine that scenario. But let's look at the video one more time, now with this in mind, with the Supreme Court's statement on this in mind.
Oh shit. Shit.
Clearly, the police chief and the mayor did not believe that the standard had been met for use of deadly force as a suspect is fleeing. Before the video came out, Michael Slager's lawyer said that Michael Slager felt threatened, that his actions were logical, it all makes sense. After the video came out, the attorney stopped representing Slager altogether, and I think that tells us a lot, Lewis, about this.
I think so. I think we probably have here someone who just wants to kill other people. Maybe strictly black people. I'm not really sure, but I've watched the video. He looks to be pretty calm during this whole thing.
That's incredible in the video. He is so calm after shooting this guy 8 times. Very casual and deliberate actions.
Yep. It's scary to watch because of that. I I don't know how many homicidal police there are out there, but you have to imagine this isn't the only one.
So here's what the police said about this before the video was released. They said that it was a traffic stop gone wrong and that the now dead man was fighting with an officer over his taser before deadly force was employed. A statement that was released by North Charleston police spokesman Spencer Pryor said that a man ran on foot from the traffic stop and that an officer deployed his department-issued taser to try to stop him, that when that didn't work, an altercation ensued as the men struggled over the taser, and police said that during the struggle, the man gained control of that taser and then tried to use it on the officer, and that the officer then immediately resorted to using his service weapon and shot him. Of course, after the video was released, we see that there were 20 feet of space between the officer and the individual who was running away. And this issue of the taser, some have seen the video and they say it looks like the officer recovered an item from the victim, the suspect, which may have been that taser. Others say that it looks as though the police officer planted an item on the individual. We don't know, and I'm not ready to comment on that yet, Lewis, but what is abundantly clear is that this is so egregious that even the police can't stand behind it, and we now are seeing a murder charge.
It's also abundantly clear that in many cases, the police officer would rather kill the suspect because the suspect has you can't ask them their side of the story if they're dead. And that, gives the police officer's story more validity.
And this made me question, what would happen, what would be different today if we had video of George Zimmerman killing Trayvon Martin? What would happen if today we had video of Darren Wilson killing Michael Brown? I'm not saying it definitely would be different, but when we have video, and we'll talk about the issues around filming police that are surfacing, when we have video, it's a very different circumstance in terms of what we can know.
It is. I think we should follow the lead in what has happened in places like California and Arizona, or was it New Mexico? I think we should put cameras on all police officers.
The officer not even attempting to give chase here, just executing the victim. The police officer was 17 years younger than the suspect, so what good reason is there not to give chase? Mr. Scott running away at 2 miles an hour, and the cop's first instinct is to fire 8 bullets towards his back. It just does not add up, and we have a murder charge, and we're going to continue to follow it. Speaking of filming the police, okay, we told you last week or the week before about the Colorado bill, which would fine police officers up to $15,000 if they try to prevent people from filming them. How likely it is that we're going to see a $15,000 fine, Lewis, is a different question, I think.
It's a different question, but still, it's a good bill, and the idea is good.
Still going in the right direction, we would say. Texas going in the opposite direction. There is a bill restricting the rights of citizens to record the police, which was filed in the Texas House of Representatives. This is House Bill 2918. It was introduced by Texas Representative Jason Villalba. I don't need to tell you which party he's a member of. It would make private citizens photographing or recording of the police within 25 feet of them a Class B misdemeanor, and those who are armed would not be able to stand recording within 100 feet of an officer. If we can say one positive thing about this, at least the danger posed by people with weapons is being mentioned in the bill. If we are desperate to find a silver lining.
Yeah, and it doesn't completely outlaw. I could understand. I actually would not be opposed to this law if it were more like 10 feet instead of 25, because the police are trying to handle a situation, and if you're right there in their way, I can see how that would cause some issues.
Listen, we're all reasonable, Lewis, but you don't need this, and you don't need to make it a misdemeanor to simply say there's nothing illegal about filming in public, period. It doesn't matter what you're doing in public as long as it's not breaking a law, and filming is not one of those things. But if you do anything that impedes a police investigation or puts the lives of officers, suspects, victims, or yourself or others in danger, then you're not allowed to do whatever it is that thing you're doing. So we kind of have a legal framework that allows for police to not allow filming if it is posing a danger, so to speak, and we don't need to make filming a misdemeanor.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, the framework basically exists. And, there's going to be a lot of questions as to whether or not someone was 25 feet away from an officer. That seems like it's going to be completely up to the officer's judgment. And so I think that, of course, this should not be this should not go into law.
An appeals court in Glick versus Kniff ruled unanimously that private citizens are allowed to videotape police in 2011. So that bill, this new bill, would go against the set precedent, which establishes an even higher barometer which needs to be met for the bill to be allowable. I always say, if the police have nothing to hide, why would they be afraid of someone taking a video of their actions if they are not doing so in a way that endangers anybody, with that very reasonable caveat? And then we have the question of, what about people's privacy? That's a separate area of the law. The expectation of privacy is different in public than in one's home, and it goes well beyond filming police.
Yeah, I mean, it has been ruled that there is no expectation of privacy when you are in public, right? So we've already established that.
Let's talk about Rand Paul. Addicting Info has such a great piece that looks at how the first 24 hours of Rand Paul's campaign have been going. It is already a hilarious train wreck. I was laughing out loud, Lewis, as I was researching this story for today. I remain convinced, and even more so after this clip, this story, that this is going to be one of the funniest Republican primaries in a long time. So generally, it's Republicans who are bad with the internet, right? Remember social media, internet engagement. The McCain-Obama campaign was a really good example of this. But Rand Paul was supposed to be different. He was supposed to be the guy who appeals to the young crowd, the guy who knows how to use social media, etc. Not working out at all. First, there's that very dramatic, epic campaign video that Rand Paul's team put together. We played a little bit of it on Monday. Very engaging, viral, shareable, blah, blah, blah. The video has been blocked by YouTube for copyright infringement. Rand Paul's team, very in touch apparently with internet video and audio, they didn't realize you can't just use other people's stuff. Like, for example, they used John Rich's song, Shutting Detroit Down. They also featured imagery of Chris Christopherson, a folk singer and actor, who said he was shocked to see himself in the video since he, number one, never agreed to be in it, and number two, doesn't even support Rand Paul's politics. He's liberal. So that video is dead, Lewis. You try to go to that. It's linked to all over the internet. That's a dead link. So not a good start for Rand Paul's campaign.
No, that was pretty foolish. Even Jon Stewart was on there, and it sounded like he was offering some type of, saying good things about Rand Paul. I don't think he's voting for Rand Paul either.
That may be different, though, because that was a news clip, presumably within fair use. So it was used in a way that was a stretch, but at least the content is within fair use guidelines. But you're right. Even if we skip these two things, there's even more questions around that video. Then Rand Paul's social media team retweeted a picture from a so-called supporter holding a sign saying, "I stand with Rand." It turns out it was a photoshopped picture of the Aurora, Colorado Batman movie theater shooter James Holmes, photoshopped to say, "I stand with Rand." Disaster. They deleted that within 20 minutes. Then when you went to Rand Paul's new campaign website, there's a video of Rand Paul talking about the importance of education and blah, blah, blah. Except they misspelled the word education in the title of the video, saying instead Rand Paul opposed to a one-size-fits-all approach to education. So not the best thing. And then this is so good. Their donation counter, they have like a donation counter that tracks incoming donations to Rand Paul. It says, "Stand with Rand, defeat the Washington machine." Right below the donation count, there's a donation reportedly from an individual named Taco Bonerstink from Atlanta, Georgia. So a laughingstock so far, Lewis.
Yeah, it's just amazing that he is surrounding himself with people who are just completely out of touch with reality and really have no idea how to run a campaign. Is this why he failed last time?
I don't know. I mean, Politico reported, speaking of last time, that the campaign team has essentially been in place for 4 years, that this all started to build in 2012. So the missed connections here are really inexplicable. At least just run spell check, I think my campaign slogan for Rand Paul, instead of "Stand with Rand," my idea is, if Rand Paul is the answer, it must have been a really dumb question. That would be the slogan I would assign to this campaign.
It's not that we think he's the dumbest guy. It's just that, what is he doing? He just has the wrong people involved, and it's just, like you said, it's a disaster. He needs to completely reinvent his campaign.
Yeah, it's like a marvelously bizarre gong show followed by incoherent explanations of things as basic as the First Amendment, which he champions himself on as being some of his calling cards. Just none of it makes sense. If you're finding this campaign as funny as I am, tweet me, twitter.com/David Pakman. We'll take a break. Great show today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded directly by the audience through the David Pakman Show membership program. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up, and through the end of the week, use coupon code APRILHALF, all one word, when you check out to save 50% off of your first payment. Today's new member of the day is Rebecca Fletcher. Thanks, Rebecca, for being a David Pakman Show member. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up. And remember, if you ever shop on Amazon.com, you can also support the work we're doing by first clicking on the Amazon banner on the right side of our website, davidpakman.com, and then doing your shopping. I recommend bookmarking the link and using it whenever you shop. It's time for Hatriot Mail.
Because it's God's divine plan that every child be born, but an act of patriotic duty to snuff that bastard if he sets a foot near your stuff. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
I don't want to say too much about this particular Hatriot Mail, but there is one word in it that is my favorite word in this particular episode of Hatriot Mail. Let's see if you can spot it, Lewis.
Will Pakman bend over and take it too? In support of homo rights? Men on their knees before men. Either a homo or he's about to get his head lobbed off. I opt for the latter. Homos, get to hell with your father Satan already. All these years and you still make us sick. Plenty o' hot beverages there, you sissy girls. Don't bother responding. Last time I spoke to a gay, I said, I do. Holy crap, did you gays fool me? Never again. Pakman is bad for children.
All right, Lewis, if you had to guess, what's my favorite word in this Hatriot Mail?
I'm really not sure. This one's full of great Hatriot keywords. What is it?
It's when he says that he hopes that gays get their heads lobbed off. Of course, referring to the term lopped off or cut off. Lobbing is just throwing with a kind of high arc. I've never seen anyone get their head lobbed off, I must say.
I haven't either, but once your head is lopped off, it could then be lobbed by any number of people.
Also, I don't understand when he says, last time I spoke to a gay, I said I do. It sounds like he said I do, like he said he would marry a gay person. I don't even understand. It's clearly very homophobic, but the last time they spoke to a gay, they said I do?
Maybe they mean someone whose last name is gay. Maybe his wife's maiden name was gay. I don't know.
Very cryptic. I don't really understand it. But anyway, make sure that you don't lob anyone's head off and that it doesn't happen to you. That would not be good. I was reflecting about how absurd Ted Cruz's actions have been in the immediate aftermath of announcing that he's running for president on the Republican side. We now have Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, one crazier than the next. And after vowing multiple times to repeal every word, as he said, of the terrible Affordable Care Act, Ted Cruz announced he was signing up for Obamacare, falsely claiming he had no choice. He equated climate change activists with flat earthers. The behavior is so erratic and absurd that I started wondering whether it might be a sort of strategy from Republicans, right? He does have a loyal following. But the mainstream Republican Party, I don't think, is going to get behind Ted Cruz. I don't think he has any shot. It wouldn't be crazy to think, hey, let's put Ted Cruz up there first because he's going to seem so nuts Then when we put up who we really want to have be the Republican candidate, they're going to seem very reasonable in contrast to Ted Cruz. The kind of monkey wrench in this hypothesis, though, is that Ted Cruz is not really that friendly with Republican insiders. For a while, he was kind of the Tea Party guy, and for different reasons, I don't feel like he actually has the relationship with the Republican Party where they would do this unless they encouraged him in a sort of indirect way, right? If Ted Cruz is not even aware that he's a plant, although he'd have to be really stupid, I think, if this is what the Republican Party wanted and he didn't realize it. I just can't make heads or tails out of how erratic and insane his campaign has been so far.
It's pretty crazy. I think he is a pretty dumb guy, but he's still going to be he's still going to have money coming in from donors and who knows where else, that money that would otherwise go to the real candidates. So I think it's kind of a stretch to say that he's a plant. But there certainly could be Republicans who are planning on running who are very glad that Ted Cruz has announced his candidacy.
Even the climate change stuff, right, where he says, climate activism is like being a flat earther. That could be a subtle setup for other Republicans to at least they just acknowledge science is a real thing. They don't need to say that they believe climate change is affected by human activities, but just by acknowledging science is real, they would seem far more grounded in reality than Ted Cruz. It just fits so perfectly. But I think I agree with you that it doesn't seem very likely that it would be at least an overt plant.
And then when we look at his father, his father, I mean, Ted Cruz may be toning it down.
Yeah.
His father has the same views, except way crazier.
The real plant would be that Ted Cruz's dad is a plant to make Ted Cruz seem like a guy who's not out of his mind.
Yeah, I don't know about that either, though. He seems pretty passionate about denying evolution and things like that.
So I've talked about how I'm fascinated by scams, and there's one going on right now as we close in on April 15th, which is tax day, the last day to file taxes, unless you file for a 6-month extension. And there's a scam going around that IRS Commissioner John Koskinen has actually addressed, which is that people are calling individual taxpayers and pretending to be from the IRS, trying to get information about individuals. Could be for identity theft, it could be to elicit payments, etc. And the calls usually say, you need to immediately give us your personal info or make a payment over the phone. My mom got one of these calls, and I've mentioned, Lewis, that my brother, former TV director Natan, is currently studying in Israel, and he actually had not yet filed his taxes. And my mom got this call, and she said, oh man, this must be a real thing. And she called back and she almost gave away a ton of information until she said, hold on, let me check with my accountant. And her accountant said, no, the IRS will not call you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an interesting one. And I guess it's kind of clever. I've never heard of this before. It's that time of the year. And I'm sure I'm sure some people have fallen victim to this.
No question. And you just have to remember the IRS will not call you. They will not email you. They will send a letter to your address on file. The one weird thing, and I'm wondering about this, is my mom got a call about my brother who had not yet filed his taxes in early April. My girlfriend got 2 of these calls and she also had not filed her taxes. So very anecdotally, the people I know who got the calls actually hadn't filed their taxes, and it makes me wonder whether it's a mere coincidence or if the scammers actually have a way of figuring out who hasn't yet filed and are focusing on those individuals.
If I had to guess, I'd say it's just a coincidence, and they are probably making so many calls. They're getting people who have and have not paid their taxes.
You haven't gotten anything like this?
I don't think so. No messages, no strange numbers calling, not yet.
I did get, shortly after filing my taxes in late February, early March, I believe it was, I got some emails saying there was a problem with my tax return. And again, because of the timing, because I had just filed, I did open the emails, immediately realized that the numbers were not in any way connected to the IRS, and I didn't fall for it. But you just remember, the IRS will not call you. And the other thing in general, if you ever get a call from a number saying you need to call them to provide some information, I always say Google the number, because if this is really the number for Chase credit card services or whatever, that number is going to come up as connected to that business on their own website. And at the same time, by Googling the number, you may uncover that there's 20 people who have posted, hey, I got a call from this number. It's a scam.
I think it's unfortunate that the majority of Americans have trained themselves to just assume anytime anything like this comes up in email or phone calls, that it's just a scam.
Well, I'm worried that not enough people have. Like, like I said, my mom often calls me, and she's very close to like falling for a bank phishing email or something like that. So I'm worried that not enough people are skeptical.
Well, perhaps it's also a generational thing.
Yeah.
You know, we grew up in the era of email and the internet, and so I don't know. That could be it.
If you've received any interesting scam calls, let me know. Always love hearing about scam. Barry Schwartz will join me next and talk about the dilemma of choice. Very interesting topic.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Barry Schwartz, who's professor of psychology at Swarthmore College and also author of The Paradox of Choice and Practical Wisdom. I'm so interested in the topic of decision making, and we've talked quite a bit about this, and you've written a lot about it, and you actually argue that fewer choices for consumers, for people when making decisions, actually may be a positive thing, although we always seem to think, hey, more choices, that's always better for us. Talk to us about how you first started researching this.
Sure. Well, first let me make clear, I'm not suggesting, though sometimes people claim I am, that a world with no choice is ideal.
Sure.
Human beings need choice, and the mistake that we've made is that since we know that choice is good, we've just assumed that more choice must be better. And the logic here is sort of straightforward. If you don't care about having 100 cereals to choose from, you can ignore 95 of them. So I haven't made your life worse by adding all those other cereals. If I, on the other hand, care about all these exotic cereals, there they are for me to choose from. So adding options will make someone better off, and it'll make no one worse off. That was the thinking of economists and psychologists.
And when you started digging into this, though, what did your research turn up?
Well, it wasn't really my research. I wrote about it. The research was done by a woman named Sheena Iyengar. And what she found is when you offer people a lot of choice, they're attracted to the objects that they have to choose from. She did this study with expensive imported jams in a fancy food store. So they're attracted to the display, but they're 1/10 as likely to buy anything. So we love choice, but then we can't pull the trigger. And the reason is, which one do you choose? There are so many to choose from. So what you end up doing is you just choose none of the above, or you decide, well, I'll choose tomorrow, but tomorrow isn't any different from today. So you end up paralyzing people. And she showed the same thing happens with 401ks. When you give employees lots of mutual fund options to choose from, they're less likely to participate than if you give them only a few options to choose from.
How can we explore what the proper threshold is for different areas of life where choice comes up? And I'll give you a couple of examples. When we think about presidential candidates, for example, it's a very common refrain that there really isn't enough choice, that ultimately Republicans end up choosing one candidate in their primary, Democrats another one, third parties rarely are really in it, and that there's not nearly enough choice. How would we, from a research perspective, determine what would be the optimal number of choices for that particular decision?
Right. Well, you asked the question in exactly the right way, because I fear that there's no general answer to the question, what's the right amount of choice? I think it will depend on the domain, and the only way to find it out is by doing the research. You know, how many kinds of cereal do you reach a point where you have paralysis rather than liberation? How about cars? How about cell phones? There are a handful of studies that have been done, and they suggest that somewhere on the order of 8 or 10 options, you get maximum benefit from all the variety without people paying the price of paralysis. But those studies all involve choices of very trivial things, so there's no reason to believe that what's true in those studies is true in general. My own view, when it comes to politics, since you chose that, is that 2 is not enough. And the result is a really, really dysfunctional electoral system. On the other hand, I think 25 would be too many. Because what would happen if you had 25 candidates is that people wouldn't know anything about any of them. It's just too much work. So you end up, I don't know, picking the one who's best looking, or the one who's at the top of the ballot, or the one your friend voted for. So, I think the way to find this out is by doing research. And my guess is that 4 or 5 parties, viable parties, would probably give people a range of options where they're likelier to find something that's really attractive rather than voting for the least bad option, and not so many options that they can't make sense of who the candidates are.
In reading about your work on this, I felt that this analysis is an analysis that could be along the same lines as the analyses that show that when making decisions, given a set number of choices, at a certain point, more information about each option is no longer positive. It no longer enables for a better decision to be made. And we could think about this, for example, with vehicles. When you do your initial vehicle search, there's very basic differences between vehicles, right? Is it an SUV? Is it a coupe? What's the gas mileage? How safe is it? Once you get into more detailed layers of the differences, what's the difference in the backseat headroom, for example? The additional information has a sort of a diminishing marginal return or marginal utility, as the case may be. Talk about that. Is there a relationship between number of choices and the utility of that, and then information about each choice?
Well, I think there certainly is, but it's worse than just to have these additional features having diminishing marginal utility, because here you are trying to buy a car and you want to be a rational consumer. So that means if somebody's giving you this information, you ought to use it. So I had a big argument with Consumer Reports magazine years ago, because they would present you with this gigantic table of all the information about all the washing machines or dishwashers or what have you. And, then you'd have to choose. And I said, listen, you're torturing people. You're implying that all these features matter, and most of them don't matter. Make a few recommendations and bury this gigantic table somewhere in the story so that you don't have to be tortured going through it before you pick a toaster oven.
And are you getting at what sometimes tends to happen? Recently I've been evaluating some options, and what I got to after figuring out what made each option different is I actually had to make sort of a secondary assessment of how much value I assign to each characteristic.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, if I'm looking, for example, between 2 apartments, size, cost, how modern is it, proximity to public transit, is there a grocery store nearby, how many friends live nearby, you ultimately get to a point where I have to say, well, what's my table of how important it is to be close to the subway versus close to the grocery store? It creates like a second order of decisions.
No, there's no question that that's true, and you have to do that, because if you give everything equal weight, then the color of paint in the kitchen is going to get the same weight as the rent or the convenience to shopping or the closeness to the subway, and that's just preposterous. So you're right. In an ideal world, what you do is you create a giant spreadsheet, and you've got all the attributes across the top and all the candidates down the side, and then each cell you assign a weight to. So location will be very important, rent will be very important, the condition it's in will be very important, other things will be less important. It's a major undertaking, and my sense is that most of us rarely do that. And if we do it, what happens is typically we get a gut feeling this is the right place for me, and then afterwards we fill in the table sort of in a biased way so that the thing that feels like the right choice is the one that ends up winning the competition. Because these are very subjective judgments. Assigning weight to features of an apartment or to cars it entails enormous amount of subjectivity. It's supposed to. But you're right, that if you give everything equal weight, then you'll just get blitzed by details that are really of no consequence. And let me say, I think the same thing is true when it comes to choosing a college or when colleges are choosing students, selective places like Swarthmore. The differences among the students we accept and the students we reject are so small as to be insignificant. I've written about this. It's basically a lottery that we pretend is not a lottery.
Once you've met certain basic requirements,
Exactly.
it then becomes sort of a lottery.
Yeah, Swarthmore has high standards. So, we get 8 applicants for every spot. So you eliminate 4 of those 8. Now you've got 4 applicants for every spot, and the differences between them are minuscule. But you can't admit all of them. So we struggle and pretend that we somehow can discern who the great ones are as opposed to the merely very good ones. And what this does is it puts incredible pressure on students in high school to find a way to distinguish themselves so that places like Swarthmore and Harvard and Stanford will take them. And it's just ridiculous. We're deceiving ourselves, we're deceiving students. And the same thing is true with students. Students think there's the right college for me. The truth is, there are 50 right colleges. There's no one that's perfect. They're all all the good ones are more or less alike. So there are a few things that matter. Is it big or small? Is it in a city or is it in the country? There are a few things. Does it have a program in biochemistry or doesn't it? Once you've identified those features that are essential to you, then you might just as well pick at random.
Very, very interesting. Let me remind the audience, we've been speaking with Barry Schwartz, professor of psychology at Swarthmore, author of The Paradox of Choice. Really great having you on. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
This is interesting. NASA's chief scientist, Ellen Stofan, says that we are within 20 or 30 years of finding what she describes as definitive evidence of alien life. She said, I think we're going to have strong indications of life beyond Earth within 1 decade, and I think we're going to have definitive evidence within 20 to 30 years. We know where to look. We know how to look. In most cases, we have the technology and we're on a path to implementing it. And so I think we are definitely on the road. Former astronaut John Grunsfeld also agrees with her. He's associate administrator for NASA's Science Mission Directorate, shares the optimism about finding alien life, saying, I think we are 1 generation away in our solar system, whether it's on an icy moon or on Mars, and 1 generation away on a planet around a nearby star. Lewis, what do you think?
I think when people hear that we are going to find alien life, they think immediately of intelligent life. But of course, they are talking about any form of life, even something like a single cell organism or just plant life or something like that. So, I don't think this sounds unreasonable.
Let's break this down because Lewis is making a good point. Let's look at what the top prospects are now, right? There's some recent discoveries in the solar system and in the broader Milky Way, which do suggest that there may well be life elsewhere, but it is not necessarily the type of life that you might think about when you talk about alien movies, for example. So oceans of liquid water below ice shells on 2 of Jupiter's moons, Europa and Ganymede. On Saturn's moon, Enceladus, possible salty water flowing on Mars, which may contain some forms of life. So we are, Lewis, talking about simple forms of life. Thinking ahead, though, what do you think happens on Earth to civilization when we find more intelligent alien life? Do things continue as normal, or does everything change?
I think everything changes. I think that if we find simple forms of life, that's great. And I mean, for those who love the exploration and the science, that is wonderful. But I don't think that's going to change things. When we find intelligent life and we prove it to everyone, because there's still going to be deniers, I think that changes everything. And I don't really know how exactly, but everything will change. There
will be deniers, and there are also already people who say that the U.S. has been in contact with intelligent alien species, but it's all been covered up. Neil deGrasse Tyson agreed with me when we talked about this on the show a while back, that there would be a huge unifying force to finding intelligent alien life, because really, who could still care about gay marriage in the U.S. when there's alien life?
Yeah. And, a lot of sci-fi shows and books, when after first contact, as it's called, everything changes and we are more cooperative. And I hope that's what happens.
Let's remember that nothing goes stale faster than human predictions of the future. So let's take all of these proclamations, with somewhat of a grain of salt, but very interesting to think about. I told you a couple weeks ago that a self-driving car was going on a cross-country trip, the first ever. The trip has been completed by GM spinoff Delphi Automotive. They completed a 3,500-mile journey across the U.S. from San Francisco to New York. A lot of the things we've been talking about, Lewis, that were the limits of self-driving cars were tested during this trip. This included the longest automated drive ever. This included instantaneous need to make quick decisions, stopping and then proceeding at a four-way stop, timing highway merges, calculating safe maneuvers around bicyclists, and even a variety of weather conditions, although not blizzard-like sleet and ice on a hill while pedestrians are shoveling their cars. So that specific scenario was still not tested. But we're showing video of this here, and you will see that the car is indeed driving itself. There was an operator in the vehicle, could have taken over control at any time. People scared, people angry about this. Why do you think, Lewis, I get so many emails from people who get mad at me that I think self-driving cars are ever going to be a real thing? It seems obvious that they're going to be a real thing. The question is, how soon?
I guess these are just people who love their cars. I don't know what else to say about that. I'm glad this was a success. You know what I'm thinking now? I'm thinking that there could be a lot of accidents and many problems with drivers who are so distracted that the car next to them has nobody in it, that something goes wrong.
No one in the driver's seat, you mean?
Yeah, right. And I think that could be a problem. But anyway, this is the future, and this is a great experiment.
Think for a second. If you have 100 auto drive cars on the road for 1 year, that would be 100 years of driving experience, which is more than any human on Earth currently has. 1 million auto drive cars on the road for 1 year would collect so much information about safe driving and accident reduction that it would almost exceed the entire collection of driving intelligence across all human drivers combined. People need to think about the value of that data.
Well, yes, but I wouldn't equate every bit of data to say it's equal to the amount of time that those cars are on the road, because these aren't learning machines, at least not yet. All we do is harness the data and try to figure out how to make things better. But you're right. The more driving going on, the more data we have, and the better things we'll get.
We have a voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. We've never gotten a voicemail quite like this. It's always interesting when we get something unique in our voicemail. Take a listen.
Hey, Dave. This is Miguel from Dallas. Just wanted to congratulate you on your show. It's great. My girlfriend and I always hear you while we're getting ready for a day in the morning. And we always end up having sex with you playing on the background. And just wanted to know, you became sort of like our sex song or something. Anyway, keep up the good work, man.
Lewis, what do you think? I don't even know what to say.
Normally, I'd say that the sound of your voice might have the opposite effect on people who are trying to be intimate. But hey, whatever works.
On today's bonus show, NASA is funding a plasma rocket. We will analyze NYPD spending, and Arizona seeks to put a ban on bans banning bags. If that makes sense, then it's going to be a good bonus show. If it doesn't make sense, it will be an even better bonus show. DavidPakman.com/membership to become a subscriber today. You get instant access to the bonus show. And I do mean instant because of our new membership system. You can use the coupon code APRILHALF, that's all one word, APRILHALF, to save 50% off of your first membership payment. You want to do a monthly membership, you'll get half off of the first month. If you want to do a yearly membership, that's really the way to save. You will get half off of that first year. DavidPakman.com/membership. I don't want to waste any more time, Lewis. We've got to get right to the bonus show because it will be compelling. I can assure you of that.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.